The world, crippled by these events, waited for the first sign of an invasion from outer space.
Step up to the microphone, say it loud and clear. A better day is coming soon to get us out of here.
Welcome to P.I.D. Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
And I'm Sharon Gilbert. Are you really Derek Gilbert? You don't sound like Derek Gilbert. Are you supposed to be in this bunker?
All right, scan my retina. Scan my retina.
Okay.
Yeah. This was my, actually, when I was in the radio business, getting a cold wasn't always a bad thing, because then suddenly, for one brief moment in time, I could go on the air and sound like this. Like the guys,
like
the
Frank
really
Black.
big voices. Yeah. Lance Henriksen was, that's the character played by Lance Henriksen in the late lamented television program Millennium.
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
Well,
as you can hear, Derek is still suffering from his cold. I, of course, as you can hear, have not yet contracted it. And I'm praying that I don't.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I sound worse than I look. Or
you look wonderful.
Than I feel.
You look wonderful,
It's
honey.
Better to look good than to feel good. It is Friday, April the 7th of 2006, a little past 7 bunker savings time. And in deference to the paucity of news today and the lack of vocal dexterity on my part, we're going to keep the blather short this evening. Hope you don't mind.
We'll make up for it on Monday, though.
Oh, yeah. We get the second half of an excellent interview with Mike Heiser coming up in just a couple of minutes. And we've got an excellent interview lined up for next week now, just confirmed this afternoon. We're going to bring back a fellow we interviewed last year, William H. Kennedy, the author of Lucifer's Lodge. He's going to talk about the new expanded version of Lucifer's Lodge, which deals with satanic ritual abuse within the Roman Catholic Church. And he's going to talk about the new movie, The Rape of the Soul.
And he's going to tell you how you can get your own copy, electronic, of Lucifer's Lodge for free.
That's right. So be listening next week as we interview William H. Kennedy. We've got more that we're lining up for the weeks ahead that should be very interesting and informative. Just a couple of notes, because I can't resist. We do need to touch on just a couple of things here.
We talked about this before we started. We said, okay, we're just going to introduce the guest. You can't
help it. It's in my blood.
I know. Well,
I was going to talk about Alberto Gonzalez and, saying that the NSA can spy on Americans without a warrant, but we've been talking about that. We know about that already. And besides, it's been going on for years. I want to make mention of the Harvard study about fluoride, linking fluoride to cancer.
To cancer, especially in boys.
Yeah. Fluoridated water is apparently linked to fluoridated tap water, linked to increased rates of cancer in boys. And this is a big deal because, as you know, we here in the United States have been drinking fluoridated water since World War II.
Oh, yeah. In fact, we're now seeing fluoridation going to infants' products.
Yes. I had my teeth treated with a fluoride compound by a dentist when I was a kid. Said, we'll coat it with this fluoride compound and it will keep you from getting cavities.
I didn't. Our dentist didn't. He barely had Novocaine.
Yeah. According to the study, the boys who drink water with levels of fluoride considered safe under federal guidelines are 5 times more likely to develop osteosarcoma than boys who drink unfluoridated water. This is a very rare type of bone cancer, but it is the most common type found among young boys and the 6th most common cancer in children. So it is interesting because this is the first that I'm aware of. Now, I've not done an extensive study on fluoridated water, but this is the first time I can remember a reputable, a big name institution coming out and saying, this stuff might be causing cancer.
Well, what's even more important about this study is that it's coming out of Harvard. Mm-hmm. And a recent declaration by another Harvard doctor at the School of Dental Medicine, Dr. Douglas, said that there was no connection. Of course, Dr. Douglas is paid by Colgate.
Uh-huh. Okay. Interesting. It's like all those studies about what was I thinking of now? Clearly the cold medications.
Those really important studies, honey.
Yeah, the cold medications probably.
Well, there were lots of studies about, there have been studies about Tamiflu, which of course they're claiming that it doesn't work, but take it anyway. Mm-hmm. So what do you do about that? There have been studies about vaccinations that show that mercury doesn't bother you at all. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and that's one thing that we need to remember is that anytime somebody comes out with a study that sounds like it's very official, you need to look at who is funding the study. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, depending on who paid for the research, you may get very, very different results. So,
well, I saw on our forum that someone had asked a really good question, I thought, and that was, what do you do about the fluoridation? There's fluoride in your water. What do you do? Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if any of the filters that are out there can filter out fluoride, but I'd love to know.
That is a good question. I don't know either. I know that in talking with Visigoth, from the Grassy Knoll, he and his wife have managed to avoid fluoridated water, and I don't know if it's because they filter their water or whether they're on a well. But I know that that's something he feels very strongly about. And in fact, he did a program on this a couple of months ago with a fellow who talked about how the fluoridated water episode came to be. Apparently it's another byproduct of processing for nuclear material. Yeah. And they needed to find a way to get rid of all this stuff. And suddenly it's discovered that dumping all of this, what otherwise would have been a toxic waste into our water is suddenly great for our teeth. Mm-hmm. This was back in the 40s. So we shall see what comes of this, if it gets any traction at all.
There's another story in here that's right below it on Watch Your News, and it's about 131 students who are poisoned by ricin in northwest China. They got this poisoning because they were planting castor beans.
Oh, that's weird.
I know. Castor beans are a big crop in Afghanistan mm-hmm. and in parts of Asia, and maybe other countries as well. Sorry, don't know, just quoting what I do know. It surprises me that you could get poisoning. Now, I realize that they are the source of ricin. Mm-hmm. But the fact that planting the beans, what was the deal? I would like to know a whole lot more about this.
Yeah, why were primary and middle school students in China out mm-hmm. in the fields planting beans?
Well, that doesn't surprise me, why they're out there planting beans. It could be that they're on summer break right now. I know that the school year is different in China than it is here.
Could be. Yeah, it says, according to the story here, it says that they had taken part in a castor bean planting activity organized by the Provincial Youth Working Commission and the local company. Boy, that sounds like fun. Come on in this weekend. Great. We're going to have a great activity. Go out in the fields and we're going to detassel corn. Oh, great fun.
Well, you know what? I grew up, and the people around us, the kids around us, I should say, you got to be a certain age, and you planted tobacco plants, and you detasseled corn, mm-hmm. and you stripped tobacco. And
did what you had to do.
You did. All the kids did. And, well, anyway, we could get into that whole thing of why kids don't work anymore, but...
Rant.
Rant. We said we weren't going to. Well, I tell you what, we're going to stop right now. We have part 2 of our interview from last year with Dr. Michael S. Heiser. And those of you who listened yesterday, you are waiting with bated breath to hear the second half, because you know what? He is an amazing teacher. He mm-hmm. has so much knowledge, but he has the gift to impart it. So... without further delay, here's part 2 with Dr. Michael S. Heiser.
We go back and talk about Genesis 3 and how that relates. If you've read the Facade, my take on the Nachash mm-hmm. In Genesis 3, the so-called serpent. It's all the same story. That from the beginning, God said, "Hey, let's make humankind in our image." Again, I take that as speaking to the council. We could talk mm-hmm. about that a little mm-hmm. later, too. Mm-hmm. And then when the creation happens, the verbs are all singular. Only God can do the creating.
Right.
So that, by definition, tells you there are Elohim and lesser Elohim. But he says, and let's have them control Earth. This wonderful place that before, I let you guys, run this show here.
Exactly. We could do another whole long discussion if we went there.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, so now you get this picture that there's this cosmic war, the forces of God and the forces of evil trying to just eliminate the sons of God. I actually believe, you asked what difference does this make to New Testament Christians? Generally, you have this idea that that there's an active warfare going on for your soul. And we've kind of heard of that. But think of this. I'll just give you one thought. What if the sons of God who rebelled, what if the sonship language of the New Testament, words like adoption, theosis, divine sonship, what if we are replacing what was lost in terms of the divine counsel, in terms of the divine sons, God's children, so to speak?
Well, that would be a great question, and I've thought about that before. What, Derek?
Well, I was going to say, that would make sense then when Paul writes that, don't you know that someday we will judge the angels?
Yes. Think of the three-tiered hierarchy: God, Elohim, angels. Okay, we are the middle slot. I believe the church, we are the reconstituted divine council. That's why Jesus calls us brothers. Okay. That's why we have adoption language in the New Testament. That's why we judge angels. That's why in Revelation 3, it says, "To him that overcomes I will put over the nations." Okay, the nations formerly dominated by the sons of God, who are fallen. I mean, there are all sorts of threads that just run through the New Testament that relate to the council as a family. You can think of the council as a bureaucracy, and that's okay. You can also think of the council as a patriarchal household. You have the father at the top. He has the firstborn. This is language about Jesus. You have the firstborn who will inherit the father's role. The father is gone in the patriarchal household. You have other sons living in the tent, other sons of the patriarch. Okay, and then beneath them you have servants, the malachim, the messengers.
Right. Okay.
It's the same kind of setup in the council, where you have the reason Jesus is not just one of the Elohim or one of the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. He's called in the New Testament monogenes, which usually gets translated, unfortunately, only begotten, which gets you into all kinds of all kinds of trouble when you talk about him being an uncreated being. The term actually means unique. How do I know that? Well, in Hebrews 11, Isaac is referred to as the monogenes of Abraham. Did Abraham only have one son?
No.
Why is Isaac monogenes? What does the term mean? It means unique. There's something unique about this one. And what's unique about Jesus is that he is Yahweh's essence. The others are not.
Now, Mike, how do you reconcile the fact that the church is the bride of Christ with this sort of idea that we're taking part in the divine council, we're replacing the fallen angels, the fallen members of the council?
I think the bride idea is another metaphor. On one level, you can say that the council, is a metaphor, but of course you have these beings referred to as being real beings in the scriptures, so it's more than a metaphor. Bride of Christ seems to be, how can I say this, more metaphorical. In other words, less literal than that, although there's still this relationship attached. I think.
Well, in the Return of Christ, he uses a very, marriage language of the bridegroom coming back for the bride. So.
Right. It's sort of a. I think the picture that emerges there is what we call in theology an already not yet kind of eschatology, that things have been begun. There's sort of an engagement period. That when Jesus was here, and this is why you have kingdom language for the incarnation. Right. And people have wondered, well, is that the kingdom or is there a millennium? When the answer is really yes. But you have something begun, the so-called down payment, and the metaphor that is used in the scriptures most aptly to describe that is a marriage relationship. At that point, to illustrate the reality, sonship is one thing because you have an adoption, you have a process. When Paul talks about sonship in Galatians 4, he refers to it being in Christ, and that unites us as sons, and there's a permanency there to it. The process is over at that point. But to illustrate, that's the already. To illustrate the not yet, I think Scripture writers used the metaphor of language and engagement. And so, you have the picture of the bridegroom coming back. I think it's just a metaphor choice that just looks at the arrangement from a different angle.
Our guest on Myth Arc Radio is Dr. Mike Heiser. We made reference a couple of times to your novel, The Facade. In addition to writing on Bible codes and Islam and their take on Armageddon, Mike has written a novel called The Facade, which I've read and enjoyed immensely. It's one of the few books that you would classify as Christian science fiction. And this relates to Mike's other interest, which is the UFO phenomenon. And so we've established sort of a foundation, and just scratched the surface, I realize, of the Divine Council.
Have to have you back.
Yeah, to really get in depth. Now, what I found fascinating, Mike, when I first stumbled onto your work on the internet, was that here I've discovered a guy with serious academic credentials in ancient history and ancient languages who's going around and giving these talks at UFO conferences to guys wearing tinfoil hats, or at least that was my first perception.
Amazing, isn't it?
But see, that's where Sharon and I are coming from. We've been fans of television programs like The X-Files, and we've got the videotape of the Roswell autopsy.
I've got summer and winter versions of tinfoil hats. I've got all kinds of stuff.
In fact, we've got tinfoil hats for our dogs. We've got that posted to our website. So, in fact, you've got several conferences that you'll be speaking at coming up in the very near future. The X Conference in Washington, April 22nd through 24th. The Orange County MUFON meeting on June 15th, and of course, then the Ancient of Days UFO Bible Prophecy Conference in Roswell in early July 2nd. How does the Divine Council, how does this theology, how does a Bible-based Christian make all of this fit together? I mean, normally you consider a belief in UFOs and a belief in Jesus as Lord as mutually exclusive.
Well, at the root of it, you'd have to define what you mean by belief in UFOs or aliens. Now, my own take is really the novel sort of takes the reader through my thought processes at a general level on that kind of question. The first question that confronts the characters in the book is, what would happen if there was a genuine extraterrestrial reality? How would that affect the faith? How would that affect conservative, Bible-believing, Judeo-Christian worldview? And the character has to bounce that around and be bounced around and forced to think about these things because of various circumstances. And then the second question that's raised in the novel is, well, what if what is being passed off, hence the title, The Facade, what if what is being passed off as this, in the storyline of the book, this upcoming disclosure event, is real, but it has to do with, what we think of as the demonic, a physical manifestation of some demonic force. So those are the two questions that the novel goes into. Now, how do I, just pulling myself out of the novel and how do I address that myself? You really have a couple options. A lot of people don't realize that there is a lot, and I mean by that, I can think of 4, really good length scholarly books, that come off university presses on UFO religions, essentially the whole UFO subculture and that kind of thing. There's a lot of academic material that deals with the big picture and then also little questions like the one I raised. Well, what about the Judeo-Christian worldview? I've been exposed to that and enough of that, and of course we talked about Divine Council stuff. My own specialization academically has been Divine Council, divine beings, good and bad, demons and angels and all that stuff.
Right.
So I have the exposure in 3 areas, and as I look at the UFO issue, the honest answer is that there's no simple answer to what's going on.
Not like Zechariah Sitchin, who says he's got the answer.
Yeah, well, Sitchin is
wrong.
I have referred to Sitchin on Coast to Coast AM as a pseudo scholar. And I feel very free in doing that again. So, I don't buy basically anything that he says because his work is so poor. And I don't think he knows any of the languages, frankly. But what I usually get asked at these conferences, I get asked because you take off against Sitchin. What are you doing here? And the way I parse that out is this way. My own view is that most of what passes for a UFO site. Let's separate UFOs and aliens for a moment. Most of what passes for a UFO sighting is either some misidentification of something we have in our skunk works or some meteorological phenomenon, whatnot. But there's a small percentage that just that are not answerable by that.
Okay.
So then you ask, well, what is that? Well, you could, in my view, let's bring the alien back in now. They're not exactly the same, UFO and alien, although they're naturally linked. There could be, just for the sake of discussion, there could be extraterrestrials. There really could be, people from other planets. The Bible doesn't preclude that. It doesn't really say anything directly about it. To use the argument from silence, well, if the Bible doesn't discuss it, it can't be true. Well, the Bible doesn't tell us there's 9 planets either, so I guess that isn't true. It doesn't tell us about microwaves and toilet paper. And, I mean, ad infinitum. So it's just a very lame logical approach or illogical approach. So I'm perfectly willing to accept the idea that this could be. It's actually a very old debate. And what I usually get asked, like at the upcoming X conference, I have a lecture that I give called Can Judeo-Christianity Sustain or Accommodate an Extraterrestrial Reality? Where I talk about, it's a great opportunity for giving the gospel to 400 or 500 people that may never have heard it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you have to explain what Christian theology teaches and what it doesn't. Okay? And so I end up doing that and basically going through all the arguments that different Christian groups have posed and going through them one by one and showing that they're not scripturally sustainable. They're not even logical half the time. And then I talk about the view that the church has had on this question. It's actually a very old question. Then it was framed, it was called the view of are there other worlds? And, theologians have addressed this, since the Middle Ages and so on. So we just go through all that. Basically the answer is, if you separate this issue, and if it can be separated, from 2 things. 1, these are not God, they are not our creators. And 2, they're not any manifestation of the demonic world. If that could be proven, and frankly I don't know what could prove that to me, but again, being honest, if that could be proven, I don't have a problem with this in the world. The other possibility, of course, is that this is a demonic manifestation where the reason I think that there's weighty evidence in that camp, in that regard, is the abduction phenomenon. Because if you actually read material on abductions, and you go back and you read, like the proceedings of I always take people to the proceedings at the MIT conference in 1992, because that's not a Christian conference, it's MIT. They're not promoting anything remotely Christian.
Right.
You get the proceedings. There's 4 or 5 papers in there that compare abductee testimony to ritual trauma victims. And it's not like 3 or 4 points of correlation. It's like 20 or 30. And so I take that to people and say, look, on the one hand, and I've said this in conferences, I do this, and we have a Christian conference where we invite the big names in this field to our conference because we're not afraid of you people. Hey, we can deal with your material, we can deal with your arguments, we read it, we study it, we interact with it. Chances are you won't invite us, but I'll never get invited back.
Because truly they are afraid of the truth.
Right. It's like, we want you to know, the reason that we put on the conference, the reason I go to these things is that, look, I'm not about just bashing Zechariah Sitchin. If it's bad scholarship, I'll tell you. But on the other hand, this is a mystery. Okay, we don't quite know what exactly it is. Here are the options as I see them. Just purely academically speaking, and treating Scripture as a legitimate source of information from an academic perspective. Here's how I see it. I'm being honest with you, telling you that I could accept this and think it's just nifty dandy and neato, and wow, wouldn't this be cool? But I want you to demonstrate to me, explain why, within all this material, you have this sinister stuff. And then you're the ones that brought up, hey, you can find this in the Middle Ages with all these demonic possession accounts. Hey, you can find it with these magic stories of the fairies and the elves. Hey, you find this in satanic ritual abuse. Now, like, do the math, okay? I mean, if this is an innocent thing, then you need to explain that. You need to explain it. And really the third area, and I don't get into this too much, but I think at the D.C. conference I'm going to need to, is that the other problem that this whole phenomenon would create for the church, even if it's not demonic, is the way you'll react to it. You will worship the creature more than the creator.
Right. Somebody comes down and
that is something that I'm going to have a problem with, and that the church is going to have a problem with for perfectly coherent reasons. Okay, the creature is not to be worshipped more than the creator.
Right.
And if they come down,
and you just lay that out, and I've, there are some places I didn't get invited back. There are some places I do get invited back. There are new things that come up. I said to the organizer, Steve Bassett, who we had at Ancient of Days, the Christian conference, we were having a panel discussion, and somebody asked a question about, is there bias against Christians in the UFO community? And my answer to that was, well, I don't get invited to too many things. and he said, right in the panel, he said, that's going to change.
Oh.
And so he followed through. He invited me to the X conference. I mean, he wasn't just, putting on a show. Now, I don't know if I'll get back, but the neat thing about it is, as a Christian, I can say, look, to me it's about a coherent worldview, both philosophically speaking, theologically speaking, and scientifically speaking. I'm not afraid of it. I go to these places. I'm on the shows. You know who I am by now. And if you really want to think through all the ramifications of this, you have to listen to people like me, because if you don't, you're being dishonest.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And, Mike, I think this is a perfect example of what Jesus called us to when he said that, the two things that we needed to do were to, in order to follow him, were to, love our neighbors as ourselves, but also then to love God to love God with all of our hearts, all of our souls, and all of our minds. And I think too often Christians are willing to settle for two-thirds of that equation.
I'd like to say something, if I could, to pastors who might be listening.
Sure, absolutely.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
If you think that your people are not reading this stuff, you are sorely mistaken. And I'm including, let's just include the Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code. I mean, one of my, I really try to do a lot of reading in esoteric, occult stuff, and the Da Vinci Code mess and all that. If you think your people are not reading this, you really need to wake up. I practically every conference, and it might be every conference I've ever been at, I've had somebody come up to me and say, I used to be a Christian until I had this experience. My pastor either didn't know what to do with it, he laughed at me, told me I needed therapy, or I came across this book or this passage in the Bible, and I raised this issue up with UFOs. How do we know this isn't the case? I've had people tell me that. I've had people ask me if I'm a pastor somewhere so they can come to my church, or if I know somebody that won't laugh at them. Okay, and it's like, boy, I wish I had a better answer to give you, but there are a lot of Christians out there who are either struggling or have redefined the faith out of the Orthodox boundaries to live with an experience they had or ideas they have read, or they've just junked the faith altogether.
And that's really a shame. And, Mike, we really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us and just start again.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Mike, would you be willing to come back?
Complex. Oh, yes, sure.
Where can people find your website and your book? Because we do want to make people aware of it. And if you are listening to this on a podcast, I'm going to put this in the XML feed, the show notes, so we'll have links to everything here that you can pull down offline. But where's your website? Where can I get a copy of the Facade? And we'll, again, mention the conferences that you'll be at. Great.
Well, the main website is www.michaelsheiser.com. That's MICHAEL, S as in Sam, HEISER.com. And that'll take you to all my other sites. I have some things related to the Bible Code. If you want to just get the Zechariah Sitchin material, that's www.sitchiniswrong.com. you got to go to the front page, take the red pill, and there you go.
Yeah, I've been through that, and that's one of the first nights that I found your website, and I was up real late trying to follow all the links through, and again, just scratching the surface. And again, if you're in any of these areas, Mike will be speaking at the X conference in Washington, D.C., April 22nd through 24th. That is a conference devoted to what's being called exopolitics, which is the political ramifications of the alien presence here on Earth. Of course, as we know, they've been here for a very, very long time.
Very long time.
The Orange County MUFON, which is what does MUFON stand for again? It's the Mutual UFO Network?
UFO Network. And
right.
This is a particularly active group that has a lot of big speakers, and they expect about 100 people. They get that regularly.
Mm-hmm. And that'll be June 15th. I've got cousins that live out in Orange County. I wonder if there's a connection there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a conference that, in fact, Sharon and I were looking at the logistics of this just this afternoon. The Ancient of Days UFO Bible Prophecy Conference, Saturday, July 2nd in Roswell, New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And that really looks like a fantastic lineup of speakers besides yourself, a number of other biblically oriented scholars who also have done a lot of research into the connections between the supernatural world and what most people perceive as the UFO phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Boy, if there's any way possible, we're going to make it there. We sure look forward to meeting you face to face.
That would be great. That would be great. You should try. I can introduce you to some people, and it'd be good for you to meet.
We'd love it. We'd love it. We'll see. We'll track it down. We'll see how we can get out there.
Dr. Michael Heiser, thank you for being with us on Myth-Arc Radio.
Well, honey, that wraps it up with the classic P.I.D.
That's right.
Dr. Heiser. Yeah, he is a great guy.
He is, and those of you who can make it to the Da Vinci Code Conference on April 22nd in Bellingham, Washington, and of course we'll put a link to the website with all of the information, location, and in the show notes, are really in for a treat. But of course, if you can't make it, there will be DVDs made available of his presentation so that you'll have all the tools necessary to intelligently discuss the movie after it's released in May. See, you're getting a head start on what's coming out in May with the new Tom Hanks movie directed by Ron Howard of the book that sold gazillions of copies.
The Da Vinci Code. And of course that lawsuit was just essentially thrown out by the judge. He said, no. Dan Brown has not copied from anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is, in the case of that first novel, which was written by Louis Perdue, is surprising, seeing as how Dan Brown borrowed so much from Louis Perdue that he actually copied a mistake in the research that Louis Perdue admits that he made. Mm-hmm. But there are plenty of mistakes in the theology connecting the dots that is the plot of the Da Vinci Code.
There are, and what really bothers me is that this whole momentum is happening. Ever since the Da Vinci Code came out, that there's a momentum of false gospels. Just getting, we've got the Gospel of Judas, quote unquote, Gospel of Judas.
Being pushed by the National Geographic Society.
They bought it for $1 million, and they are pushing big time.
Produced a big special that they've been airing on television, and it's been getting a lot of play on the local news channels here in St. Louis.
I know.
Oh, this has been missing for a long time. What really shocked me was seeing a theologian. I don't know what institution he was from. I didn't catch that, but he was wearing a white collar, so I can guess. But anyway, stepping up there and saying, this just shows the diversity, the breadth of opinions that composed early Christianity.
First century church. Oh, excuse me.
Buddy. There's a reason it didn't make it into the canon. There's a reason the early church fathers didn't see fit to make enough copies.
Look, Jesus Christ referred to Judas as a devil.
Yes, said that it were better that he had never been born.
Yeah, he didn't. He was not buddy.
Yeah, it's really curious, and maybe this is something we can talk with William H. Kennedy about next week, as he is a Roman Catholic and cares deeply for his church, which is why he's done the investigating he's done into the work of the enemy inside the Roman Catholic Church. We can talk why the Roman Catholic Church seems to be trying to rehabilitate the Apostle Judas.
Well, we can talk to him about that. And you know what? We're also going to be conducting some really interesting interviews over the next few weeks. You want to make sure that you tell all your friends to listen to P.I.D. Radio. And it has nothing to do with us because, frankly, we're a couple of schleps. But the people that we interview are really, they're amazing researchers. They know how to express their subject area clearly. We're going to be talking with David Duncan again over the next few weeks. We're going to be talking about to Guy Malone once again.
Right.
We're also going to be chatting with David Flynn once again. We've talked with him via email a couple of times the last few days, and we're trying to put together an interview where we discuss the mound builders.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Nicole and I went over to Cahokia Mounds last weekend and found some very interesting symbolism that's been recovered, not just from Cahokia Mounds, but other mounds in the U.S., Moundsville, Alabama, and some of the other. It's also been discovered that the Serpent Mound, a very famous mound in southern Ohio, right along the river, was not created as early as they thought. Originally, the creation date was thought to be around AD 400. And recent discoveries there have placed the date of the Serpent Mound at about the same time as Cahokia, Moundsville, and other of the big mounds in along the Mississippi.
So we really would like to talk to him about this. It's so funny because there was an artifact at Cahokia that Derek and Nicole saw, and it was so intriguing. They took a photograph, or was it actually something that was?
We took a photograph, then I found a better picture.
Sent it to David Flynn in an email, and he sent back this amazing mathematical
analysis
and astronomical analysis of this and how it related to early civilizations in America. And we saw that and we said, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the symbolism was also connected to ancient Hebrew and Gnostic symbolism.
Yes. And he gave us the linguistics of it. And you know what? His brain.
Yeah.
It's beyond me.
Yeah.
It's in another dimension.
It is. Also, one of the other interviews we've got coming up for the next few weeks will deal with the subject of a reporter, who went to work in a congressional press office by the name of Susan Lindauer. She is now being held at a facility in Fort Worth, Texas for the mentally ill. She was arrested and charged with conspiring to aid. Well, basically, she was accused
not registering.
Yeah, as a foreign agent, which is like one step below being accused of spying for a foreign nation. And what's really curious about the case is that she is a relative, second cousin, I believe, of the president's former chief of staff, Andy Card.
That's right, it is a second cousin.
So there's some very interesting and disturbing details of her case, and we're going to talk with someone who's very familiar with the case.
Yep. So lots of good things coming up. In the meanwhile, we're going to just let you give us your opinions at radio@peeringintodarkness.com.
Or you can weigh into the forum at peeringintodarkness.com/forum.
Don't say weigh in, honey. Oh, what? You know what? I may last through the weekend on this thing, I may not.
I think you look wonderful.
Honey, you're fabulous. I love you so much. Well, I'll tell you what, on that note, we'll go into our own weekend, and until Monday, I'm going to be Sharon Gilbert.
I'm Derek Gilbert. Thank you for listening to P.I.D. Radio.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Gonna step up to the microphone.